Hello and welcome to the 34th edition or episode of the PEMpodcast, Psychic Eye Mystery Podcast. I'm your host, Victoria Laurie, with my fabulous sister, Sandy. Can you believe I got through that whole intro without fumbling it for
Yeah.
once? I think that's the first time in 34 times. So,
Well, today's going to be me fumbling big time. So just saying.
we've got some, we were just talking about some of the names that poor Sandy has to pronounce. So, yeah, I think I have here's my cue card. Yeah, I have my cue cards ready. Oh, yeah. But, then I have to pronounce them when I give you my feedback.
Yes.
So, I'll just be like, that guy, what was his name? And I'll ask you and you'll fill it in. I know
I'll
you
hit delete.
Oh, goodness. So how you doing? Are you doing good? I haven't really seen you since last week because we're both so crazy busy.
So I stupidly signed up for I'm a regular Pilates student, and I signed up for a class that was like the top level, and the teacher is Korean.
Diamond, the double diamond.
Yeah, whatever. So the teacher's Korean, and I really like her. She's amazing, understands the physique and how to work the anterior muscles, blah, blah, blah. So her common phrase is to yell at you. 1, 2, feel your glute, feel your glute. And I'm like, what is she talking about? I can't feel anything. I'm supposed to feel my glute. So I walked out of class. I felt really excited. I've been, managed to keep up. And there was only one other woman in the class. So it was kind of like a semi-private lesson. Friday, I'm feeling okay, a little sore. Yesterday, dead of the freaking world. Couldn't move, like just on the couch crying. So,
oh, wow. Like tired or sore?
no, everything hurts.
Oh, wow.
Everything hurts.
Yeah.
Neck, knees.
Oh, wow.
Hands. And then because it's been
delayed onset soreness. It's an actual thing.
Yeah.
It's an actual thing. Yeah.
Really psyched about it. So I canceled today's class because I just couldn't. And then I went out into the yard because it's the first cooler day that I've had to deal with all the weeds. And it's embarrassing when you drive by my house because of the weed fest that's happened in my front yard. So I was out there tugging away. Now I'm square and tired again.
And it has an adorable front yard, so there's nothing embarrassing about it. But
whatever. There was with these weeds that had taken over. Like one looked like a tree. It's not good.
One was a tree.
One was a tree. I'm like trying to cut it, trying to pull it out. And I'm like, it's not coming.
Whack, whack, whack.
So true. I had to get like a special.
Why is Sandy wearing plaid? It's 87 degrees
I know,
outside.
right?
Where is she going with that axe?
I literally needed one of those major what do you call it? I don't. Yeah, it wasn't a little hatchet, like chopping away at it. That weed, that root is never coming out.
Oh, goodness.
Wow. It's this thick.
Wow. Yeah, well, when I several years ago, Sandy came to visit me so sweetly, because my house was up for sale in the backyard. I had this huge backyard. It was almost an acre. And it's just me in that fucking house. So, I ignore it. And so talk about weeds. Oh my God. So I think you were there for like 4 or 5 days. And I had her working from early morning to night. And I just remember I cleared out underneath this huge pine tree. I'd cleared up this whole area and was throwing down mulch, bags of mulch, just like, I think there were like, I don't even know, like 100 bags of mulch, something like that. I mean, we just kept going back to Home Depot and loading up my car. And
let me just talk about loading up your car, because you know how like bags of mulch are heavy. So Victoria like takes the cart. She's like, I'm into CrossFit, and she's hurling the bags of mulch onto the cart and then zips through the line. And then she gets to the car and she's like literally throwing them into the back of the vehicle. And this poor man walks up. He goes, "Hey, can I give you a hand?" Trying to be all chivalrous. She's like, "I got it." And I thought I'd be heroic and carry a 50-pound bag of fertilizer. And I'm like,
yeah,
working on like an idiot.
So I picked Sandy up with the 50-pound bag of fertilizer, carry her to the car, hoist her in. Yeah, speaking of that fertilizer, I'm laying all that mulch, and it takes me like an hour or two, something like that. And Sandy had set off to fertilize the lawn, and I look up, and like hours have gone by, and she's still fertilizing the lawn
because it just was endless. Because
Yeah.
Victoria's like, once you go through one row, just do it again to make sure you can really fertilize. I'm like, oh my God,
No, you
fertilizing
have
by
like
Victoria.
overlap,
Yeah,
overlap.
overlap, which was
Yeah.
like inch by inch as you make your way around the yard.
And it was like a million degrees. It was so muggy
It
that
was.
weekend, and
It
it
was
was just
awful. But the clinker
horrible.
was, I was like, what time is my flight? Because you asked me to wash the windows. And I was like, I'm out.
Oh yeah,
Sandy
no,
out.
that was
Drop the
done.
microphone.
Yeah, no, that was, yeah, I know. God, you were awesome that weekend. Really, you were just awesome. Pays to have a really good relationship with your sister, let me tell you.
Free slave labor.
Yes, exactly. Oh God. Oh, the good old days. Good old days. I do not miss that house at all. At all. At all. Okay, so book promotion. Boop-a-dee-doo. Deadly Forecast. This is one of my favorites. I know it's you love it too, but
Yes.
this is truly one of my favorites. This is a dual timeline. So MJ and Gilly are well represented in this book, along with Kat, who is well represented in this book. And
I would say poorly represented in this book.
no, 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 no. Kat's hilarious. She was the greatest foil. I loved her in the Abby series as my foil. But anyway, so Abby and Dutch are supposed to get married, and Abby has a premonition that for some reason she's going to be the death of Dutch. So she's trying to keep her distance from him. Their wedding is approaching. Kat has hired cupids to jump out of the tree, stallions to pull the
And people wonder why I constantly say loosely based on me. You
Cat has
know,
gone. Cat has
it is
gone
a
to the
super
extreme in
mystery.
every. I think that I remember her just walking around with bullhorn. I think is how I wrote her. Just like she just had a bullhorn, just kind of as an accessory, and it might have been bedazzled. I don't
Could have
remember.
been.
So anyway, so Abby, the book starts out basically that Abby wakes up and she's strapped to a bomb, and so for most of the book you're trying to figure out, like, it goes backwards from Abby's timeline, goes backwards to when it began, leading up to when she's strapped to a bomb. And then there's a dual timeline happening where they know that Abby is missing from the wedding. She's been abducted from her house, and they are in a race against time because this guy who strapped her to a bomb has done this to other women who went kablooey. So they're trying to find her before the bomb goes off. So it's a little bit of a nail biter. So this is one of my favorites. So everywhere books are sold, if you're interested. Anyway, okay. So I don't necessarily have a client anecdote per se this week, but something like really, really cool did happen. So like I've been seeing a lot of manifestations of stuff that because I've started meditating. I know it's a shocker, but I've started meditating, and I was mentored years ago by a man named Kevin Allen, who passed away. I get teary eyed every single time I say he passed away. It just kills me. I loved him. He passed away, I think, 3 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, and unexpectedly died in his sleep. And the amazing thing about his passing really was the last photo he took of himself. He is it was a cool kind of artistic shot where he is looking through a glass, like a champagne glass, and blowing a kiss. So he's blowing a kiss from the other side. It's just like, talk about prophetic. He was probably one of the top 3 psychics in the world. He was the best I've ever met, and I've met quite a few. He was amazing, really, really amazing. Anyway, so every once in a while he shows up in one of my meditations, and he showed up and he starts waving this white feather in front of me, and I'm like, okay, white feather. It's featured in MJ books. White feather is her guide, so it's something that kind of has meaning to me. So he keeps flashing this white feather, and he's like, I'm going to show you a white feather just so that you know all of this is real. And I'm like, okay. And so an hour later, I'm flipping through Twitter and a guy posts this. It's a white feather that he just happened to randomly find. And it's on my timeline. I'm like, oh, hi, Kevin. And now I cannot take Emmy for a run in the trails without seeing a feather like literally in my path. So I thought that was really cool. And then I think this was Thursday. I think Thursday. I had two clients, and I usually like make up little cards, little 3x5 cards, just with their name on them, so that I don't forget their name when I'm doing a reading. I can address them by name. And my first client's name was Victoria, and my second client's name was Sandy. And so when I looked at Zoom, it was Victoria, Sandy, and then it had referenced the next meeting that I was going to have after that was this podcast. So I took it to mean that our crew, our collective crew, loves our podcast. That was kind of my feeling. And, you know, like I read for maybe one or two Victorias a year and fewer Sandys. I think I can count on one hand the number of Sandys I've read over 22 years. So these are not super common names that I come across a lot. So I just thought it was really cool. So yeah, a little love from the other side. I'll take
And
it.
on the same day, you know.
And then
Like
the
it's
same
not
day.
like, yeah, it
Exactly.
wasn't,
Yeah.
yeah.
Lined up. Boop, boop. And they didn't know each other. Oh, and then the Sandy that I read, Sans had so many similarities to you. So she was also Scorpio. And then there was like all these like little things in her life, and I kept thinking like, my sister does the same thing. My sister's had the same thing happen to her. My sister, you know, like it's boom, 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 boom. So it was really interesting. Victoria and I didn't really. Well, I don't know. I didn't think we had a lot in common. Maybe we did, and I just missed it because I was like, oh, doing my thing. But yeah, so I thought that was really cool. If you start looking for coincidences in your life, you know, like little things, it's kind of amazing how they connect these totally what should be completely random things, and they start lining them up in a way that feels like play, you know. So I just thought it was really cool. Anywho,
Well, you'll be pleased to know that my college tuition dollars are hard at work. The first information I got from my sons was that the hot tub was up and running with a short video clip of them lounging.
it's a blow up hot tub, right?
Yeah, it's an inflatable hot tub. I can't.
How does so it's a blow up hot tub? Where did the bubbles come from? Like I don't want to know. Is it a Frankenbeans dinner beforehand? Like,
No. It's a legit hot tub. It has jets that move water around, and apparently it takes a night to like 24 hours to heat the water.
oh, it has a heater too?
Yeah.
Get out of here.
Yeah.
Wow. Huh.
This is the college life. Just saying.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I also love that in a reading that I had with a dear friend of mine who is fucking amazing, Krista Eve, medium. If anybody wants like a fantastic mediumship reading, Krista Eve. I'm pretty good at mediumship. She blows me away. So she was reading for me, and a friend of ours came in and had advice for me, and then pointed to Sandy and was like, "Get the hot tub," you know.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Sandy doesn't want a hot tub, and it turns out
I
boys
do
come
want
home
a
with a
hot
hot tub. So yeah, that was cool. Anyway, all right. So this is famous case filled with
Yes, this is the first in our series of men behaving badly.
yeah.
So we'll have
Lots of men in this one were behaving badly. Trust me.
well, yeah. So we'll have a series of cases that feature men that have behaved poorly. So
Choices.
today's
It was
case,
the fuck around and find out kind of time.
yeah. So today's case is about Jimmy Hoffa. And the story goes that on the morning of July 31st, 1975, Jimmy Hoffa, one of the most influential American labor leaders of the 20th century, was reported missing by his wife Josephine after he failed to return home as promised the previous evening. The last reported sighting of the famous union leader was on the afternoon of July 30th, between 2 and 3 p.m., when Jimmy was seen waiting near his car in the parking lot of the Macus Red Fox restaurant in Bloomfield Township, Michigan. Though he is popularly believed to have been a victim of a mafia hit, to this day, Jimmy Hoffa's fate remains a mystery. And I will say in advance, I'm sorry for my mispronunciation of the multiple Italian names in this story. Yeah, we haven't gotten there yet, but bear with me. So Born James Riddle Hoffa on February 14th, 1913 in Brazil, Indiana, to parents John and Viola, Jimmy learned early on about the hazards of unsafe working conditions when his coal miner father passed away in 1920 of lung cancer. Following her husband's death, Jimmy's mother moved the family to Detroit in 1924, where Jimmy grew up and remained in the metro area for the rest of his life. After leaving school at age 14, he began working a full-time manual labor job to help support his family. And he organized his first strike as a teenager while he was working for Kroger grocery stores, which offered substandard wages, minimal job security, and poor working conditions. Although Jimmy was young, his courage and approachability in that role impressed fellow workers, and he rose to a leadership position. By 1932, after refusing to work for an abusive shift foreman, Jimmy left the grocery chain. He was then invited to become an organizer with the local 299 of the Teamsters in Detroit, and within a few years, he helped to transform the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, the IBT, into the most powerful labor union in the country. Through his early involvement, the Teamsters grew from 75,000 members in 1933 to 170,000 members by 1936. In 1937, Jimmy met and married Josephine Posniak, an 18-year-old Detroit laundry worker of Bowling Green, Ohio. Following their nuptials, the couple bought a home in Northwest Detroit and had 2 children, a daughter, Barbara Ann, and a son, James. By 1939, the Teamsters Union had 420,000 participants, and membership grew steadily over the next 10 years to top 1 million members by 1951. At the time, trucking unions were heavily influenced and or controlled by organized crime, and for Hoffa to unify and expand trucking unions, he had to make accommodations and arrangements with local and regional organized crime families. Naturally, the mafia's influence on the IBT increased as the union itself grew. At the 1952 IBT convention in Los Angeles, Hoffa was selected as the national vice president by incoming President David Beck. With the new leadership, IBT moved its headquarters from Indianapolis to Washington, D.C., which required Hoffa to spend more time in D.C. from his Detroit home because of his expanded responsibilities. Hoffa was lauded for his tireless work to expand the union and for his unflagging devotion to the organization's least powerful members. His caring and approachability were captured in one of the more well-known quotes attributed to him: "You got a problem? Call me, just pick up the phone." In 1957, Hoffa took over the presidency of the Teamsters after Beck was convicted and imprisoned in Seattle for fraud. However, shortly after assuming his new role, the AFL-CIO convened and voted 5-1 to expel the IBT on charges of Hoffa's corrupt leadership. Given that the IBT accounted for almost $1 million in annual membership fees to the AFL-CIO, Hoffa remained in his position as Teamsters president and won his re-election in 1961. In 1964, under Hoffa's leadership, IBT membership grew to 2.3 million members by bringing virtually all over-the-road truck drivers in North America under a single national master freight agreement. Hoffa then tried to bring airline workers and other transport employees into the union, but had limited success. In spite of his many victories with IBT, Hoffa spent the majority of the 1960s under investigation, on trial, and appealing convictions or imprisoned, largely due to the Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy's Get Hoffa squad of prosecutors and investigators. He was convicted on March 4, 1964 in Tennessee for jury tampering and sentenced to 8 years in prison and a $10,000 fine. While out on bail during his appeal, Hoffa was convicted again in a second trial held in Chicago on July 26, 1964, on 1 count of conspiracy and 3 counts of mail fraud and wire fraud for improper use of the Teamsters pension fund, and he was sentenced to 5 years in prison. He began serving his aggregate prison sentence of 13 years on March 7, 1967, at Pennsylvania's Lewisburg Federal Penitentiary. When Hoffa entered prison, Frank Fitzsimmons was named IBT acting president. Frank was a Hoffa loyalist who owed his high position to his friend and fellow Detroiter. The plan was for Hoffa to continue to run the union from prison through Fitzsimmons, but once behind bars, Fitzsimmons began to distance himself from Hoffa's influence and control. As a result, Hoffa resigned his presidency on June 19, 1971, paving the way for Fitzsimmons to be elected IBT's president on July 9, 1971. On December 23, 1971, less than 5 years into his 13-year sentence, Hoffa was released from prison when U.S. President Richard Nixon commuted it to time served, and did that in exchange for IBT as the first time endorsed Nixon, a Republican, and in his presidential reelection bid. Controversy soon followed due to a rare clause contained in the Teamsters Retirement and Family Protection Plan, which entitled Hoffa to a $1.75 million lump sum termination benefit. By 1973, the financially secure Hoffa began to make plans to seize the IBT leadership from Fitzsimmons and stage his comeback, where he started with the local 299 in Detroit. But by early 1975, he faced immense resistance towards his efforts to reestablish his power from many fronts, including that of several members of the mafia. Hoffa's staunchest opposer was Anthony Provenzano, who had been a Teamsters local leader in New Jersey and a national vice president of the union during Hoffa's second term as IBT president. Although the two men had once been friends, they fell into a feud when both were at Lewisburg Federal Prison. As a high-ranking member of the New York Genovese crime family, Provenzano was not someone to be taken lightly. With tensions high, Anthony Giacalone, an alleged kingpin in the Detroit Mafia, and his younger brother Vito volunteered to mediate between Provenzano and Hoffa by offering to set up a peace meeting on July 30th, 1975. The meeting was due to take place at 2 p.m. at the Marcus Red Fox restaurant in Bloomfield Township, a Detroit suburb. Jimmy knew the restaurant well, as it had been the site of his son James's wedding reception. Jimmy left his home at 1:15 p.m. earlier than necessary so he could stop by the office of his close friend Louis Lintow, a former president of the Teamsters Local 614 who now ran a limousine service. Lintow had become Hoffa's unofficial appointment secretary, so he was aware of the planned meetup with the Giacalone brothers that afternoon. Lintow was out to lunch when Hoffa stopped by, so Hoffa left a message for Lintow with a staff member and then proceeded to the Red Fox restaurant. Between 2:15 and 2:30, an annoyed Hoffa called his wife Josephine from a payphone in front of the Damon hardware store directly behind the Red Fox and complained that he'd been stood up by the Giacalones. When Josephine told him that no one had called the house phone, Jimmy assured her he would be home by 4 to grill steaks for dinner. Two men who recognized Hoffa stopped to chat with him after seeing him standing by his green Pontiac Grand DeVille and pacing the restaurant parking lot. Shortly thereafter, Hoffa made a call to Lintow to complain that the brothers were late. The FBI estimates that Hoffa left the location without a struggle between 2:45 and 2:50 p.m., and according to one witness, Hoffa was seen departing the parking lot in the backseat of a maroon Lincoln or Mercury car with 3 other people. This was the last reported sighting of the 62-year-old Jimmy Hoffa. By 7 a.m. the next day, Josephine called her son and daughter to report that their father had not come home. At 7:20 a.m., Lintow went to the Red Fox and found Hoffa's unlocked car in the parking lot, but there was no sign of Hoffa, nor any indication of what had happened to him. He called the local police, who later arrived at the scene with the Michigan State Police and the FBI. At 6 p.m. that evening, Hoffa's son James filed a missing persons report, and the Hoffa family publicly offered a $200,000 reward for any information about the disappearance. The FBI compiled a list of several suspects, including Louis Lintow. He told FBI agents that on the day in question, Hoffa had called him at 3:30 in the afternoon, but the FBI suspect that the call was made earlier, based on the timing of other phone calls from Lintow's office from around the time of Hoffa's disappearance. Joseph Giacalone, Anthony's son, and Charles Chucky O'Brien, Hoffa's foster son. Joseph owned the primary piece of physical evidence obtained in the investigation, a maroon 1975 Mercury Marquis Brougham. Apparently, Chucky had borrowed the car earlier on the day in question to deliver fish. Investigators and Hoffa's family suspected that O'Brien had a role in Hoffa's disappearance, primarily because police dogs had identified Hoffa's scent in the car. Anthony Giacalone, Vito Giacalone, and Anthony Provenzano. These men denied having scheduled a meeting with Hoffa and provided alibis supporting that they were nowhere near the Red Fox in the afternoon of July 30th. Provenzano told investigators that he was playing cards with Stephen Andretta of Union City, New Jersey. In 2001, the FBI matched DNA from Hoffa's hair with a strand of hair found in Joseph Giacalone's car, but it is possible that Hoffa had traveled in the car on a day other than July 30th, 1975. Thomas Andretta, brother of Stephen, Salvatore okay, go ahead, swing and a miss. Yeah. I'm sorry, Salvatore Briguglio and his brother Gabriel. An unnamed witness identified these 3 New Jersey men who were close associates of the Anthony Provenzanos and having participated in the abduction and murder of James R. Hoffa. In 2000, the FBI named suspects Thomas Andretta and his brother Stephen in the Hoffa disappearance. Both men were New Jersey Teamsters and reputed Genovese crime family mob associates. In his 1991 book, Hoffa, Arthur A. Sloan said that the most common theory of the FBI investigators was that Russell Bufalino was the mob boss who ordered the murder, and Salvatore Brugliano, his brother Gabriel, Thomas Andretti, Charles Chucky O'Brien were the men who lured Hoffa away from the restaurant. However, a former U.S. prosecuting attorney has since suggested that O'Brien would have been considered too unreliable for the job, and instead suggested that Vito Giacalone was the lure. On June 16, 2006, the Detroit Free Press published the entire Hoffa's memo, a 56-page report prepared by the FBI for a January 1976 briefing on the case. The memo records a theory that Hoffa was murdered at the behest of organized crime figures who regarded his efforts to regain power in the Teamsters as a threat to their control of the union's pension fund. The Hoffa's memo noted that Anthony Provenzano was not senior enough to order a mafia hit, and that Provenzano's role in the case was to act as a lure. The Hoffa's memo suspects that Hoffa was lured away from the Red Fox to a separate murder location, and the location of the murder place is unknown. James Bucaletta, a professor of criminology and criminal justice at Northern Arizona University, suggested in 2017 that it was likely that Hoffa was murdered 1 mile away from the restaurant at the house of Carlo Licata, the son of mobster Nick Licata. Hoffa's body was likely then disposed of in either a waste incinerator or a crematorium in the Detroit area. A local waste incinerator and a landfill in New Jersey has been offered as a possible location where the body has been taken. However, the Hoffa's memo could not make sense of a plan to transport Hoffa's body to New Jersey when the Detroit mob could have taken care of such things locally. Hoffa's body has also been rumored to be buried in Giant Stadium. Ground-penetrating radar found no trace of any human remains, and again, none were found when Giant Stadium was demolished in 2010. By January 2013, the reputed gangster Tony Zerilli hinted that Hoffa was originally buried in a shallow grave with a plan to move his remains later to a second location. Zerilli said that the plans were abandoned and that Hoffa's remains lay in a field in northern Oakland County, Michigan, not far from the restaurant in which he had been last seen. On June 17, 2013, the FBI was led to a property in Oakland Township, which was owned by Detroit mob boss Jack Tocco. After 3 days, the FBI called off the dig as no human remains were found. In a deathbed statement, a landfill worker claimed to have buried Hoffa's body in a steel drum 15 feet below the surface in a landfill beneath the Pulsaki Skyway in New Jersey City, New Jersey. On October 21st, the FBI obtained a warrant and completed a site survey of the landfill. In July of 2022, the FBI announced that nothing of evidentiary value was discovered from the survey. As of 2021, digs are periodically conducted in the Detroit area in search of Hoffa's body, despite the common theory that the body was cremated. There is a wide agreement among crime historians and investigators that Hoffa was murdered on the order of his enemies in the mafia. However, key details remain either unknown or unprovable, which has ensured that no one has ever been charged in relation to this case. Hoffa's wife, Josephine, died on September 12, 1980, 7 years after he was last seen outside of the Machias Red Fox. He was declared legally dead on July 30th, 1982 by Oakland County, Michigan probate judge Norman R. Barnard. My sources for this story are Jimmy Hoffa, History.com, This Day in History, July 31st, 1975. Labor leader Jimmy Hoffa is reported missing. History.com editors 7/29/20. And biography.com, What Happened to Jimmy Hoffa by Tim Ott, 12/10/20.
Yeah, and it was Wikipedia, Jimmy Hoffa.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's okay. No. We just want to, we're always sources.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what was really interesting was, well, there are a couple of really interesting things about this case. There's a personal connection for me and Sandy because he was abducted basically down the street from where we lived. We lived in the village of what was her name? Bloomfield, right? Village,
Yes,
Bloomfield? Yeah,
Bloomfield
whatever,
Village.
around in there. And Hoffa was taken from what is now called Andiamo's, and I've eaten at Andiamo's a number of times. And that shopping, it sits on Telegraph Road, which is a very busy 8-lane road, and carries most of the traffic along Telegraph to the Lodge Freeway. So it connects to 696 and 96. It's a main
thoroughfare.
Yeah, exactly. And it's always been busy. As long as I've been alive, it's been a busy street. So Where this restaurant was kind of up above the street, passing cars constantly. Behind it was a busy, like almost like strip mall area. And what's interesting is that the hardware store where Hoffa made the call then became an Ace hardware store. So it's like for 60 years been a hardware store. So Hoffa gets, Hoffa is invited to this peace talk. Okay. So they agree on the Red Fox to have the meeting. Hoffa probably was the one who suggested it because of its location, because it was so public. So I have a feeling he kind of thought, I don't know if I trust these people, right? He might have trusted the Giacolonis. He might have trusted them, but I think that you don't get to the kind of membership that Hoffa recruited in the Teamsters without being someone who could read people very, very well, right? So he was charismatic. He worked for the underdog. He had to deal with nefarious characters kind of constantly, along with Robert Kennedy. So he was kind of this person who had to be very familiar with different kinds of personalities and sort of see when trouble was kind of coming up ahead. I have a feeling he picked the Red Fox because of its location, because it was so open. It's interesting that he was outside the restaurant. So this is a meeting that's supposed to take place at 2 o'clock, and he's not in the restaurant. He's outside. So I don't even know if he went inside. I don't know if there's any reports of him ever going inside. He might have gone inside to see if they were there. They weren't. Then he went out to wait in the parking lot. He wanted this meeting to happen in public because I think he kind of knew. So they're late. He calls his wife, and eventually a car pulls up. Who's in the car? Like, that's the big question, right? There is no way Jimmy Hoffa is getting in the car if he is surrounded by the enemy. Like, that's just not going to happen. So I think Chucky definitely was behind the wheel. This is his godson. I think at least one of the Giacolonis, I think Vito was probably in the car. And I also feel that one of the representatives in the car was for Provenzano. So there might have been some muscle as well, but I don't think he was physically pushed into the car. I think he was convinced to go in the car. Hoffa's a character well known in that area, would draw attention. There's no way that they're going to push him into the car, physically push him into the car. So he got in willingly. And I don't think he would have gotten in willingly unless the terms of the initial agreement about that meeting were met, meaning there was a peace broker and a representative of Provenzano. So he gets in this car. It's my belief that he was driven to another location. He was taken out of the car. So he was driven to another location where there weren't a lot of ice. And he was taken out of the car. And it's my belief, intuitive belief, that he was shoved into the trunk of a car. I then believe he was trucked to New Jersey in July in the heat. I don't think he was dead. I just don't have a feeling like they killed him and cremated him. Like that just, there's a sense on the other side when someone has been cremated. It's hard to describe, but it's just this sense that there's no body. And that the body went very quickly. And cremation, I will say this, cremation, I get a lot of spirits that thank their relatives for following through with a cremation because there's this feeling of like it just releases them, from being attached to that body. So cremation's a good thing, honestly. I've always been a little, I don't know, like, what if I'm still alive, kind of thing, like going to be cremated. But it's actually on the other side, it's looked at as very favorably. I've never gotten that sense with Hoffa. And when Sandy and I were first talking about this was before I'd seen her write up, and I hadn't researched it at all. I think you had mentioned, I forget what you had mentioned, but I had said, no, he was taken by three people. Three people were involved in his abduction. It's really interesting to find out that there were three people in the car and he willingly got into it. And then I was telling Sandy, this is kind of a morbid story, and I'm sorry if this image is disturbing. I think it's so awful that it's almost like gallows humor. So years ago, when I was living in Austin, the Lake Travis is a 71-mile long main water source for Austin. And when they have significant droughts, as they're undergoing right now, the level of the lake drops significantly, and it gets very, very frightening. When I was there in 2010, was I think we had 90 days without a single drop of rain. It was really, really awful, and the lake levels got down to about a quarter full. So it had gone from full the year before to a quarter full. And it's a very scary thing in a city of 800,000 people to see your water source like evaporate. Anyway, so they were finding all sorts of stuff at the bottom of Lake Mead because the water had receded so much. And one of the, this is terrible. One of the things that they discovered was an oil drum filled with cement, and sticking out of the top were just a pair of femurs. That's it, nothing else, just the femurs. And the feet were in the cement. And I remember reading this, with morbid fascination, because I write murder mysteries for a living, reading this story and seeing the picture of that. And I immediately had the thought, like, that's what happened to Hoffa. Like, it was so random, so weird. Hadn't thought about Hoffa at any time beforehand, but it was just like looking at that oil drum and thinking like, yeah, that's how Hoffa, what happened to Hoffa. He was, wearing cement shoes. So I believe when I'm looking at the theories, I really believe the deathbed confession of the landfill worker. I believe he was tossed, his body was tossed. I believe he was executed. I do think he was shot in the head. I think that he was driven in New Jersey, whether or not he was still alive. I think he was probably barely alive. You have to figure if he was abducted around 3 o'clock, he's probably driven to a location, maybe an hour outside of Detroit. So you're looking at 4 o'clock. It's July. The sun sets here at 8:30, close to 9, because we're on the westernmost Eastern time zone line. So the sun still had a few more hours before it set, but they're driving east. So they're driving in the right direction for the sun to set. So I think he was in the trunk. I think he was alive when he was pulled out of the trunk in New Jersey. And I think that they wanted to witness his death. I think that there was a thing like, you got to bring proof that he's dead. So I think he was executed, and I think he was shoved into a drum, and I think he ended up in a landfill. That's my theory. I don't think he was, he's underneath. Sorry, my dog is trying to get my attention. I don't even know what she's doing. Anyway, I don't think he was incinerated. I don't think he was buried in Michigan. I don't think he was even murdered here in Michigan. I just don't think that is the case. Who were the people in the car? That's the big question. Again, I think Chucky was at the wheel initially, and I think Vito was in the car. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure the FBI has considered all of the evidence and all of the players, and the Briguglio, one of those guys,
Yeah.
okay, might have been in
Yeah.
it, and Russell Buffalano, who was supposedly the mob boss that ordered the hit, was from Pennsylvania. So it's sort of this kind of link, right? New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Michigan. These are routes that the Teamsters, take when they're delivering goods. Really sorry about my dog, you guys. It's just,
You have a spastic creature in your background.
I don't even know. What do you have?
A special creature.
She's actually got the cover of my microphone, the little fluffy thing. So
It's just
I think
killing it.
she's like, oh, look, a dead rat. I'll
Yeah,
just play with
yeah,
this.
Exactly.
So that's what I think happened. I think he was murdered in New Jersey and then discarded in New Jersey. It doesn't surprise me that 50 years later, the FBI goes looking. They're not going to dig up that whole landfill, right? They're just going to kind of like be like, well, let's look for an oil drum. I had a fuel tank buried in the house that Sandy came and helped me with the landscaping, and that had to be dug up because it could be an environmental hazard if it rusts through, right? Because so many of those rust through. I was very, very lucky that mine was kept under an awning. It was buried 6 feet down under an awning, so it was spared a lot of the moisture that came down. But in having that dug up, I learned a lot about these oil tanks that were sunk into the ground. They were the source of heating back in the 50s and 60s. And the guy who was, in charge of digging up this oil drum was like, you got to keep your fingers crossed that A, the tank was empty, and B, that it hasn't rusted out. He said, because we see that all the time. So this is an oil drum thrown into a landfill. Probably a lot of moisture and a lot of acid is getting dumped on top of it. And like not, acidic foods, right? You throw away the peel to an orange, you throw whatever, right? Tomatoes, blah, blah, blah. And I think it was corroded beyond recognition. And I don't think you're ever going to find any sign of Hoffa, not one single shred of evidence of Hoffa. He's just gone. So he might as well have been cremated as far as I'm concerned. But that's what I think happened to him. I could be wrong, absolutely, because I think that everybody who knows is gone. I think they're, I think they've died. I think they've passed on. So that's my theory.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I remember hearing in the news not too long ago that the FBI had been searching in New Jersey, and I thought that was really odd. Because most people, I think, assume that Hoffa ended up in
Right.
Detroit somewhere.
Yeah.
So
I've never thought that. I've always thought he ended up, like, I think intuitively in my mind, I always thought like he was like in New York, kind of that area. So when you had mentioned New Jersey, I'm like, yeah, that's where he is. That's exactly where he is. He's in New Jersey. I think that they wanted to know he was dead.
Hmm.
So, you can order a hit and pay money, but for someone like Hoffa, you really want to know that he's gone.
Yeah.
Never to appear again, because the guy was just too powerful. He was way too powerful. So I think that they would have wanted to have witnessed that or performed the execution, themselves. So, I guess never get in a car and be taken to a second location. I guess we all know that one. So yeah, so fascinating case in that it's 50 years later, we're still talking about it. Like, what happened to him? It's still like this huge mystery, and everybody knows Hoffa's name. It's not just people who were alive back in the 70s. It's, other generations recognize Jimmy Hoffa. They know who that is. Roughly, they know who that is. So interesting.
Okay. Well, thank you for your insights.
Always. Thank you for writing it up.
Yes.
And good job with the names. I only had one nope. That was pretty good, Sans. I got to give you credit. That was pretty good.
Shaking the whole time.
Well, at least it wasn't me. I would have definitely butchered way more than what you did. So you
I
did a great
probably
job.
did. And for our listening audience, I apologize.
I think you did great, honey. Really. I think you did great. Truly, truly, truly. Okay. So that's another episode of the PEMpodcast. If you are viewing this on YouTube, if you give us a like, ring the bell, and subscribe, we really, really appreciate it. Thank you very much. We appreciate all of our followers. We keep every week, the numbers keep going up, which is really kind of cool. So thank you and welcome to all new members. We really appreciate it. Okay. All right, Sandy, I love you so much.
Love you too.
I will see you next week.
Sounds great. Okay.
All right. Bye.
Bye, everyone.